It's time for good energy, and I'm Dr. Julie, and welcome to Bodyful Day 251, and we are talking about computers and the senses. This is the last day on our series on computers and the senses, and we're talking about the kinesthetic sense. The kinesthetic sense is the sense of movement in your joints and muscles. And we're going to talk about how that can contribute to stress or good energy in when you're trying to have enough energy to interact with a computer or trying to have enough energy after you've interacted with a computer. But before we get to that, let's start with the basics. Go ahead and take a deep breath in and release. The next deep breath in, I want you to expand in the belly, expand in the chest, expand in the sinuses, and then there's a little tuck of the tail when you do that. Take a deep breath in. And release. And we're talking about the kinesthetic sense. We're talking about joints and muscles while we're at a computer. So last time you spent a lot of time at the computer and felt your wrists or hands or joints tighten up, go ahead and get that into your mind and take a deep breath in. And release. I have been having a very joint-y week this week, so it started out my thumbs, well, it started out my middle fingers last Tuesday, kind of shifted to my thumbs on Friday, and now it's hanging out between my ring finger and my pinky finger. I know whatever it is just kind of flipping through my meridian lines, and it just needs to get out, but I'm just gonna keep doing what I'm doing, and as long as it's moving, I'm okay. So today we're talking about the kinesthetic sense in computers. How do we interact with a computer in the most comfortable way so that we can actually get our task done? How do we have energy to do things after we've spent a day sitting at a computer doing our work? And we're going to look at how good energy in can come from your muscles and your joints. We're also going to look at stressors coming from those muscles and joints. Now, we talked about breathing into those hands and wrists, and when we talk about that, we can talk about it as a stressor. So sitting here and doing this all of the time, you're going to start to get tenseness. You could, if you're not relaxed, you could start to get tenseness in these fingers. And what happens is it may start out as achiness in here, but what it'll end up with is achiness in here and here. If you start getting swelling in the upper joints of your hands and fingers, it means that you've had too much tension in these little muscles that are attached to your bones in your hand. And we've talked about this before. It's a really easy release. You just kind of go along in between those fingers on both sides, and you find tight spots and you hold them. And you can actually wiggle while you are holding them, and that will give you a little bit more room in those hands. You can do the same thing in the wrist. If your wrists hurt, you can go on either side, front and back, and kind of push into each of those places on the front and back and see if you can find something that's tight. And then you just hold it and wiggle, and that will release some of the tension in the wrists and hands. Now, a lot of times we hear about the fact that sitting is the new smoking, and when you sit at a computer all day, yes, you are stressing the spine. We've already talked about this earlier in the week, but you're also, and we've already talked about the fact that you are shrinking your hip flexors. Your hip flexors go from the back of your spine to the inside of your hips, to the inside of your hip bones, to the inside of your thighs. And when you sit at a 90-degree angle, and most of the time you should be moving around at 180 or even greater than 180 angle in those legs, that shortened muscle length will put some strain on the back, particularly the low back, because when you stand up and those muscles are short, your back goes with it, and you have to stand up. And what that does is that stresses out that low back. Ooh, I've got a tickle in the back of my throat. So how do we get over that? Well, one of the things you can do is you can get up from the computer and stretch every once in a while. Now, there's an interesting thing. We always talk about getting up and moving, but there is a way that you can actually really stretch those hip flexors while you are actually sitting in the chair. One of them is to just turn your body to the side, and I'm not at a good angle for this. I'm going to tip my camera down a little bit. You can turn to the side of your chair, let your butt cheek fall off, and you can actually stretch your hips while you're seated. You can actually bring that heel up to the back of your butt, and you can just sit at your chair and do a stretch. And that stretches out the front of that quad. And if you pull it a little past, so here's 180. If I go a little bit further, that's a little bit further, and that further stretch really kind of opens up that hip area. So if you don't want to get up and move around, you can just let your butt cheek go off the edge of your seat and stretch a little. Now, can you do this during a Zoom call? Probably. Just look like you're twisting a little. And as long as the Zoom call is head up, nobody cares what you're doing down below. Shh. Yes, people care what you're doing down below. But stretching is not one of those things. All right, so you can stretch those hip flexors. You can also get up and move around and stretch those hip flexors. You can also stretch the calves, those calf muscles. But you can also get kinesthetic energy in there by just flexing and pointing while you are sitting at the desk. You can flex and point. You can push into the ground with your toe, and you can flex your foot, push into the ground with your toe and flex your foot. You can actually get kinesthetic energy just by pushing and flexing, pushing and pointing and flexing. And by doing that, you're actually getting a little bit of exercise, and it actually helps with blood sugar. So we talked about the fact that stresses make you want to eat because your blood sugar drops, even though you have the energy, the blood sugar drops and you feel like you need to eat more. You could start working on just a little bit of exercises by flexing and pointing your toes. Again, you could do the same stretch while you're at your computer, but instead of just stretching, you could actually push against your hand and strengthen your quad a little bit. These are all things that you can do to take a break from your computer. Now, obviously, you could also do a standing desk. You could stand up and work at your desk. Walking desks are fantastic because that's actually a great way to get energy. So walking gets energy while you're actually doing a task. Now, if you're already stressed and it's a pretty stressful task, walking and doing a computer task at the same time may be a little overwhelming. But it's possible. And if it's just one of those things that you sit in front of your computer and you just go, getting up and walking would be a great way to, if you were walking while you were typing, would be a great way to get some exercise during the day, even though your task is mostly sedentary. So the kinesthetic sense is this idea that we need to get motion and stretch. That's good energy in to help with overall energy to heal while you're working on a computer. Taking that break and stretching and moving gets you more good energy in so that you can get back and you could focus on your task. Sitting there for a long period of time and getting frustrated doesn't really do much, and in fact it reduces your energy to heal because you're frustrated about the project. We talked way back on day 1 about the importance of visualizing the project in your mind's eye before you sit at your computer, because sometimes the not having all the questions answered before you start means that you have a little bit less clarity and it's a little harder to do your task. So pausing, getting some clarity on your task, and going back to the computer is a good way to make sure that you are using your computer time and your brain computer time as efficiently as you can. All right, so this is the end of computers and the senses. Join me next week where we're going to talk about something that nobody talks about. We're going to talk about constipation and the senses. We're going to talk about how you can use your senses to get stuff out. We need to get stuff out. Regularity is important. Pooping right is a key thing. And if you are too stressed to do so, if your morning schedule is not the right way, then you are going to find that it's going to cause blockages and energy problems later on. So join me next week as we start a series on constipation and the senses. We're going to jump right in and talk about all the good energy and the stressors that can be contributed in that. And then as we go through the week, we'll talk about how various senses can help us get past that constipation energy and move things through. All right, let's finish it off. Take a deep breath in and release. Have a great day. I'll see you here tomorrow.